The crime scene and laws of forensic science.
Clear, go ahead. Please respond to a 34 Pacific Drive.
Hey, beautiful people. Won't you take a trip with me? I want to look further into crime scene processing. I've seen a lot of it done what I would call wrong. Fundamentals of crime scene processing. Each crime scene is unique. That is because the chain of events that created it is unique. But there is uniformity in how to study and process a crime scene. Keep in mind the crime scene is constantly changing and decaying after its creation. This video also emphasizes on the materials needed for documenting a crime scene to preserve the information to process at a later time. Now, common knowledge and research shows that the job of a crime scene investigator is to obtain physical evidence by coming into contact with a suspect or a victim. Okay, so who's involved in a crime scene investigation? Professionals at the scene of a crime may include police officers, crime scene investigators, and forensic experts. Now, if you're wondering, what is the role of a forensic expert at a crime scene? At the request of the investigating officer, they assist in collecting of evidence and packaging and preservation of evidence, critical factors. Another important thing at a crime scene. First priority, safety of all individuals. Second priority, evidence collection. So what are the steps to follow for a proper investigation? Secure the scene. Separate the witnesses. Record the scene. Search for physical evidence and collect physical evidence. First, securing the crime scene. Because if the area is not secured, then you run the risk of a few things. The transfer, loss, or contamination of evidence may occur. It is the duty of the first responder to protect the area by restricting entry to all unauthorized personnel, also keeping a log of the visitors while collecting information, and if needed, requesting additional manpower. If there are witnesses, they must be separated. The reason for separating the witnesses is so that they can't get together and create a story. Now, after the crime scene has been secured, it should be recorded properly. Photography and videography of the overall area and close-up photos with and without a measuring ruler should be taken. A view of the crime scene should be taken from several different angles and distances. Several close-up photos of any evidence and bodies should be taken. Notes taken at the crime scene also play an important part in recording the crime scene. The search for physical evidence must be thorough and systematic so that no evidence is missed. The type of search really depends on the type of crime scene and the number of investigators. So let's look at the different searching patterns. Strip or line method, spiral method, quadrant zone method, or the wheel ray method. The collection of evidence at a crime scene depends on the type of crime scene. Always collect temporary, fragile, or easily lost evidences first. Protective clothing should be worn at the crime scene while collecting evidence. And always follow standard operating procedure for evidence collection and storage. It is very important that all evidence is properly packaged, sealed, and labeled. An evidence log and a chain of custody document must be attached to the evidence container. An evidence log should contain a case number, description of the evidence, name of victim, name of suspect, date and time of recovery, signature of person recovering the evidence, signature of any witnesses present during collection. And last but certainly not least, there should always be a chain of custody. A detailed log showing who collected, handled, transferred, or analyzed evidence during an investigation. So I bet you money. Somebody out there is saying, oh man, I know a case where they didn't do this, that, or that. I know I do. And we shouldn't. We should not know of cases that haven't followed these steps, because these steps are critical, instrumental at being able to solve these cases, to find these people that are missing, to find these murderers or these kidnappers or these abusers. We have to follow protocol. When you don't, things slip through the cracks and we go months, years with no answers. Now that might happen anyway, of course, yeah, because there's things called mysteries. But there is no excuse for not checking every box, as they say, crossing every T and dotting every damn I when you're investigating a crime scene. Because somebody is counting on you to give them some sort of understanding. And it might be laying right there in the rubble. Don't overlook it. With that said, I am going to share something on a lighter note. Something else I found while working on this project, and I decided, yeah, I like that. So it's a part of my reaction playlist, but I'm going to slip it in here, even though this is certainly a can we talk about this type of video. But I'm going to mix it in because it's relevant and it's funny and we need to laugh in this world. But don't make light of what I've shared with you today. Pay close attention to the cases that you follow and hold your law enforcement accountable. If they're skipping steps and the job isn't getting done, it is on them. And it's not fair. So, you see something, you say something. Right off the top of my head, I just feel like saying, Buckeye and Cook County, do better. I'll see y'all in the comments, beautiful people.
Bang, bang, bang. Liminal test. My name is Matthew Steiner.
Matt Steiner is a senior crime scene analyst and veteran investigator of over 21 years.
Today we're going to break down the portrayal of forensic science in TV and movies. As we're critiquing these clips, understand that their goal is to entertain, and they definitely do that. The Wire Trajectory Analysis. First off, the gun safety in this was it was comical and not realistic. You wouldn't take a loaded weapon and start waving it around in a crime scene. Fuck. Initially, the original crime scene investigator on the scene should have took note of directionality.
Motherfuck.
We do that by looking at the conchoidal fracturing of glass to see which direction the force is going.
Oh, fuck. Oh, fuck.
So we would have known in this case originally that the bullet was coming from outside to the inside of the kitchen. So what they do from that point is they try to figure what would the trajectory line be from that bullet hole through our deceased body. Which way was that bullet going?
Fucking A.
Lo and behold, there is the bullet in the door.
Motherfucker.
From that point, I think we deviate from reality. But we wouldn't just start picking at that hole. They could be destroying rifling that's on that bullet. And that's what really we're going to send to the lab to do some sort of analysis compared to a suspect's gun.
Motherfucker.
NCIS, personal protective equipment.
No rule number 2 is always wear gloves, but when there's this much blood...
Rain gear. In the truck.
So in this scene, they actually talk about wearing personal protective equipment.
Rain gear.
Yet no one is wearing any sort of garb.
What happened?
Everyone is wearing just like a jumpsuit or their regular attire and just gloves. Basically, you would never want to do that.
Well, apparently that one did.
Beyond that, our crime scene technician, he's taking photographs. He then wipes his brow. Then he handles evidence. Basically what he's done, he's taken DNA that was on that camera, on his brow, and put it onto our evidence on the scene. And then proceeds to have a whole conversation while holding that evidence right by his face.
No.
Loaded weapon, examining a body.
One raspberry push-up, one orange.
So what are we looking at here, Doc?
The worst dressed stiff I've ever seen.
This stiff and I pounded a beat together for 5 years, so show some respect.
So it's common for TV and movies to present crime scene investigation in this fashion where we have all these different people doing a million different things all at once inside of a crime scene.
That means it's working.
We would want that crime scene clear. We wouldn't want anyone in there except the people who are doing the investigation. In real life, not that we would make fun of someone who is dead.
Show some respect.
But there is a certain gallows humor that goes along with crime scene investigation and death investigation. And it's one of the ways to cope with it is to adopt this type of humor.
I know.
Crime scene analysis as portrayed in Boondoggsates.
You got any theories to go with that tie?
He was the only one done right. Double tap, back of the head.
And the pennies?
New hitman wants to leave his mark.
That's a possibility. Another possibility is they were placed there with religious intent.
In this scene, they focus too much on the why the crime happened.
What is the symbolism there?
Crime scene analysis usually deals with the who, the what, the where.
Oh, shit, I forgot about that one.
The when, the how of something, but never the why.
Kinda makes me feel like river dancing.
The why has to do with motive, and there's no way that we can prove why with science. Heat crime scene analysis.
This guy here has got what appears to be a double tap entry wound to the sternum. Tattooing around the head wound, scorched bone, close range, probably executed.
In this scene, we have I'm assuming he's a crime scene investigator. He makes an assumption that a gunshot entry wound was at close range.
Entry wound to the sternum, close range.
We can make those determinations. When you fire a gun, besides the bullet that comes out of the barrel, we have burning and unburned gunpowder.
What difference does it make?
That burning gunpowder will go a certain distance.
Bang.
We then also have unburned gunpowder that goes a further distance than that.
Bang.
And then obviously the bullet goes the furthest distance.
Bang, bang, bang.
So we'll look at the injuries, we'll look at whether there is burning, and then we'll look for things like stippling, and that is the abrasions caused by the unburned gunpowder abrading the skin.
Okay, what about them?
Not having the weapon itself, you really couldn't say exactly, but we could take that weapon and the same ammunition, bring it to ballistics, and do several test firings at different distances to replicate that pattern, to see if we get the same diameter of gunshot residue and burning.
Rock and roll.
Fingerprint evidence 7.
Oh, man. Well, I can tell you guys, just by looking at the swirl pattern, not the victim's fingerprints.
This is kind of overkill. It's probably because it looked cool is the reason they put the alternate light source in there with fluorescent powder. It really could have kept doing just regular black powder. Probably is what we would have done in the field.
You're kidding me.
It's like prescribing brain surgery for a headache.
So many freaks out there.
Beyond that, the techniques aren't that great because they're using too much powder and then they're using compressed air to blow out the friction ridge detail. We would never do that.
Jodie Foster told me to do it.
Also, right here, he calls it a swirl pattern.
Just by looking at the swirl pattern,
There's no such thing as a swirl pattern. There's arches, loops, and whirls. So there's some parts of this that are true, but a lot of it is fancy.
The voices made me do it.
Processing a vehicle, the other guys.
We found a lot of stuff. From bodily fluid and hair samples, we determined that a bunch of old homeless dudes had an orgy in the car. Oh, God.
So what they get right in the scene is that they're processing it indoors, they bring it to a garage, and that's what you want to do in real life.
Yeah, and then to top it all off, some joker comes along. I think he knew you guys were cops, because this is what I would call a spite shit.
Also, the attire of our crime scene technicians is correct.
Oh, yeah.
They're all wearing personal protective equipment, Tyvek suits, gloves, masks.
Dirty Mike and the boys.
Which is funny, it's a comedy, but they got it right.
Found a deer vagina.
The rest of it is just kind of silly and funny, determining, that it was a spite shit, or that, there was a deer vagina.
What?
Or homeless guys had an orgy inside the car. It's just kind of funny, but very unrealistic.
You turned my beautiful Prius into a nightmare!
How to Get Away with Murder, Detecting Latent Blood.
They didn't find anything.
So in this clip, way too many people inside this crime scene, all doing random things at once, just like we saw with the loaded weapon clip. Some people have gloves on, some people don't. No one is wearing a Tyvek suit or booties. And probably the biggest cardinal sin is that we have the suspect inside the scene.
How much longer?
You know, that's not reality at all. What? They start pulling out knives out of a knife block and they swab, but they swab one side of the blade, not the other side of the blade, nor do they swab the handle.
Seems like a foolish move.
The last step was to do luminol testing, and that's a chemical we use inside of crime scenes to look for latent blood. Everyone would have been cleared out of the room at that point. Is a possibility that luminol is carcinogenic, so you'd be wearing a mask as well as a Tyvek suit.
Oh, you're being paranoid.
But you know, they just start randomly spraying the chemicals and everyone else is around breathing it. That's a no-no.
Or maybe he's just being smart.
Also using some sort of UV light with it or some sort of blue light with it. Luminol, you don't need that. You don't need any sort of alternate light source. You just make the room dark. You spray it in combination with hydrogen peroxide, and if there's a reaction, it will glow.
I'm going to run what's called a luminol test.
So this is where they actually do get it right. Later on, he's called out for diluting the blood by spraying too much luminol.
The more luminol you spray, the more you dilute the blood.
In real life, we'd be very careful on how much of the chemical we're going to add. There's other chemicals that will react in glow or chemiluminesce in reaction to luminol.
Okay, all right, I get it.
Ballistic and fingerprint analysis, The Dark Knight.
That's Brooke underneath. Gonna take ballistics off a shattered bullet?
No. Fingerprints.
Recovery technique is pretty good. We would try to cut it out of the wall.
This is your original scan. Here it is re-engineered.
And there's the thumbprint he left when he pushed around in the clip.
This is completely impossible.
Yeah.
It's not based on any sort of science.
Fair enough.
The rifling inside the barrel is going to create markings on that bullet, which would have destroyed a fingerprint that was there anyway, let alone the extreme heat that would have burnt off most of the fingerprint. Insomnia, autopsy.
Clear cause of death was herniation of the brainstem due to intracerebral hemorrhage.
Beaten to death.
Base contusions?
Superficial. Most of the trauma was to her face and the top of her neck.
First off, what I don't like about the portrayal of this, which they do sometimes in these shows, is that someone's got to turn on a light.
Not this time.
You know, we'd want as much light as possible.
Told you.
It didn't appear that there was even an autopsy done.
But there's gonna be.
There was no Y incision on our deceased. So to say that the neck injury is superficial, how would you even know that without actually looking at it?
I don't know.
To see how far the tissue is damaged, or if the hyoid bone was broken or fractured.
Beaten to death.
There's no way to know just by doing a visual inspection to see that sort of thing.
Told you. Body gave us nothing.
At the end, you know, he's handling the body, takes his gloves off, and then touches her hair. She could be bleeding from the head, and now you're taking your bare hand and touching her blood.
Didn't even blink.
And then maybe later on having a sandwich or whatever. So it's kind of ridiculous.
This guy, he crossed the line.
Crime scene assumptions, True Detective.
This is going to happen again. This is his vision. Her body is a paraphilic love map. He might not have known her, but this idea goes way back with him.
You get that from one of your books?
I did.
I got to thank Woody Harrelson for this. He basically says what I'm going to say anyway.
You got a chapter in one of those books on jumping to conclusions?
Anytime we start an investigation with an assumption or we come up with a theory,
I guarantee this wasn't his first.
We always have to be ready to abandon that theory.
You attach an assumption to a piece of evidence, you start to bend the narrative to support it.
What I like about this clip is that Woody Harrelson's character kind of stops.
Which I got a problem with.
Bone collector, collection of evidence.
We're gonna need those handcuffs, Amelia.
Well, then we can remove them when they get here.
Look in the suitcase. There's a small saw. I want you to saw her hands off at the wrist line. We gotta have those cuffs for prints.
This is not realistic at all. We would never destroy the body intentionally like that.
It's true.
To recover handcuffs, we would somehow get those removed.
Saw off her hands.
And she takes a couple seconds to try to remove them. They're stuck. So the next option is to cut off the victim's hands.
I can't.
No. There's still going to be blood that's going to be coming out of the other end of that hand, which is going to completely consume whatever DNA or fingerprints that would be on the handcuff. So not a great option.
Hey, why don't you knock it off, Lincoln?
I don't need to knock it off.
Forensic anthropology, Castle.
Yo, this building was set to be demolished. That is until the salvage crew stripping the place came across his body.
Buried under concrete, no less.
Got cause of death?
Not till I do a full exam, but he's probably been here since they poured the concrete back in 1978.
Anything else you can tell us about the victim?
He was maybe early 30s and a sharp dresser. Check out that powder blue suit.
In this scene, they're able to somehow miraculously perfectly excavate this skeleton fully intact.
Buried under concrete, no less.
Unlikely.
What?
If you were to be breaking up concrete with sledgehammers or jackhammer, you would have already damaged it, probably crushed the ribcage, if not a bunch of the bones.
I know who the victim is.
What?
Beyond that, to give it a general age estimation, I think that is possible.
He was maybe early 30s.
Your skeleton is going to age in a very predictable manner.
I am intrigued.
So that's what they look for, certain growth and then deterioration of bone.
And a testament to the truly indestructible nature of polyester.
Early forensic investigations in cold blood.
Did you find any shell casings? Nope. Which means that you can bet they didn't leave any fingerprints either.
First off, we can note that they're not wearing any sort of personal protective equipment.
Nope.
We wouldn't want to just take powder and just pour it onto a surface and then dust that powder around.
Madman.
We would take that powder and put it onto a separate, clean surface that's not related to the scene at all.
Stupid.
Other than that, they make an assumption that casings were cleaned up somehow or picked up.
Find any shell casings? Nope.
Could have been a revolver. Semi-automatic, automatic weapon. Casing's going to be ejected out of the side of that weapon, but a revolver, that casing's going to stay inside. So that would be the reason why you might not have a shell casing at the scene.
Probably.
Criminal Minds, crime scene analysis.
Jane Burney and Vinia Dev were here.
Jane tried to run, Vinia didn't.
How do you know?
She's half under her desk, which means she tried to hide and the unsub found her.
One of the worst things you could do as a crime scene investigator is to lose your objectivity. What if she was just sitting at the desk? Is that the position she died in? Maybe she crawled to her desk.
So these three were stabbed and the rest were shot to death.
They also make an assumption that we have one unknown subject or killer as opposed to two.
Have you considered two killers?
Yes, but the bloody footprints all seem to come from the same pair of shoes.
It's possible that someone else didn't step in blood, right?
Yes.
Or that they both wore the same pair of shoes. We see this a lot. You would have to recover those shoe wear impressions and analyze them in a lab, which is a quick visual analysis couldn't give you that information. Evidence at a crime scene, Family Guy.
And now, back to Jake and the Fat Man.
Hey, look over here on the carpet. That's a cigarette butt. This is probably evidence.
Yeah, well, can you bring it over to me?
I can't move it. This is a crime scene.
So what we see in here is the typical chalk outline where the body was. It's iconic.
Well, can you describe it to me?
But it's a joke. No one does that anymore. You're destroying evidence. You could be adding chalk on top of DNA that could be important or other trace evidence that could be important.
You know what? Forget it.
Iron Man 3, the use of virtual reality in crime scene analysis.
The heat from the blast was in excess of 3,000 degrees Celsius. Any subjects within 12.5 yards were vaporized instantly.
No bomb parts found in a 3-mile radius of the Chinese theater.
No, sir.
This is something that could happen, maybe not to that extent that we see in Iron Man 3, but there is current research in the use of virtual reality and augmented reality to help assist crime scene investigators.
Talk to me, Happy.
So if we document our scene with a three-dimensional laser scanner, the laser scanner is going to collect millions and millions of points of data, and we'll be able to see anything that's in the view of that scanner. At the end, we wind up with a three-dimensional model. We could then take ourselves virtually through VR technology, place ourselves in a scene to make observations. And those are the observations that we'd use for a reconstruction. Where is evidence? What's the context of this evidence? What happened and what order did things happen?
Lots of pageantry going on here. Lots of theater.
Minority Report, predictive crime analysis.
Time horizon, 12 minutes.
All right, what he's doing now we call scrubbing the image, looking for clues as to where the murder is going to happen. Beyond that, the date of the crime, all we have to run on are the images that they produce.
So in this movie, we see our precogs, our psychics, producing images of crimes that haven't happened yet.
The precogs can see a murder 4 days out.
Now, I don't think that that is ever possible, but there is cutting-edge research and technology that does help us identify crimes in progress.
Oh, this is good.
One of those technologies is what's called ShotSpotter that identifies audio from gunshots and specific to gunshots happening in certain areas and giving it a GPS location.
It's a park.
Dutch police are using augmented and virtual reality to go back and look at crime scenes in the past. Death investigation, Sherlock.
Suicide is pretty common among city boys.
We don't know that it was suicide.
Come on. The door was locked from the inside. You had to climb down the balcony.
So in this scene, we actually have a homicide that's being posed as a suicide.
You've got a solution that you like, but you're choosing to ignore anything you see that doesn't comply with it.
I like what Sherlock says here, that you're just taking some of the evidence and basing your theories on that and ignoring all the other evidence. So in this case, he uses deductive reasoning to come up with the handedness of our victim.
Like? The wound's on the right side of his head. And? Van Koon was left-handed. Requires quite a bit of contortion.
Left-handed?
Normally, the easiest way to figure out the handedness of somebody is just asking, you know, the family, the friends, co-workers of somebody. They would know whether he was left-handed or not.
Coffee table on the left-hand side, coffee mug handle pointing to the left.
We'd then want to look at other evidence that could be supporting that it's a homicide, not a suicide. Some people are ambidextrous. Some people have cross-dominance. Well, they prefer to do certain actions with certain hands. There are plenty of people that are left-handed that shoot guns with their right hand. He's also ignoring that fact.
You're finally asking the right questions.
Tasting evidence, bones.
Hey, bones. Bones. Get it? What are you doing?
Yeah, yuck. You would never want to
Oh
put
my
evidence
God.
in your mouth.
So you don't lick bones. Who licks bones?
It's been in Russia. It's human.
Forensic anthropologist, just by looking at it, would know that it was human by its shape. And by knowing what that looks like versus a dog bone versus a chicken bone. Burned body, CSI Miami.
What a shiny residue on it.
There could be traces of hydrocarbon.
Yeah, we used the mini ray to detect the hydrocarbons he left behind and find his point of origin.
It's a great idea.
We see them using a mini ray, which is a version of a multi-ray, which is a VOC detector to detect hydrocarbons. She's kind of waving it around like a divining rod. And that's not the proper way to use it. First off, you want to be closer to the surface that you suspect the accelerant to be on. So you have to be lower to the ground to really detect anything significant.
This is definitely our point of origin.
I think it was an excuse for them to use some cool tech, like the mini ray. But, I mean, a real-life crime scene, you would do a search. And in that search, you would have found a large burn pool in the parking lot. Illegal DNA collection, Luther. So that's a really interesting yet very illegal way to get DNA from somebody. Fruits of the poisonous tree refers to evidence that's obtained illegally. The metaphor is that the tree being the source of the evidence, if that is tainted, anything that comes from the way that you collect that evidence is also tainted, so the fruit. Most commonly, we'll get DNA from somebody through consent or a court order. Another way to get DNA from somebody is through what's called an abandonment sample. This is where investigators will collect things that are discarded by a suspect. That could be a can of soda, a cigarette butt that was willingly left behind. Sometimes this takes a lot of work. Sometimes investigators have to follow somebody around for weeks at a time, waiting for them to spin on the sidewalk or to drop some trash. Even though it may be tempting to get evidence in this way, you don't want to lose that case by doing something stupid, like collecting evidence in a legal way.
I know exactly what that feels like.
Returning to the crime scene, Red Dragon.
Where's the dog? No one heard barking. There's nothing about it in the case file.
So what I really like about this is that, you know, they show a crime scene that's properly safeguarded. Even on a door, they have a door seal. That door has a broken window that they have put a piece of cardboard and secured that cardboard with evidence tape. This is what you would want to see when you went to a crime scene, especially if you went back. You want to make sure you're the one that's breaking the seal of that door to, you know, make sure that there's continuity inside the crime scene, that if you collect evidence now, that it wasn't placed by somebody else coming into the scene afterwards. The one little misstep I see is that nothing is processed for fingerprints. That whole path of him going up the stairs, those walls would be covered with fingerprint powder. What we see here is, you know, the set designer's attempt at creating arterial spatter on the wall. Those are like those arcing patterns that we see. They don't look very realistic, but the mechanism that's used to create them is very difficult to replicate. So I understand, you know, why it doesn't look perfect. Other patterns that they got right, though, was those drag marks. And that's definitely important types of bloodstain patterns that we want to look at. We want to look at the direction in which those drag patterns are going. And we could tell that by the feathering of the blood as it's moving in a certain direction.
He dragged the bodies into the master bedroom.
We see another pattern that's interesting to me on the mirror. Didn't look like they sampled those bloodstains. Once it's dried, we're gonna take a swab of some sort. We're gonna hydrate that swab with distilled water, and then we're gonna swab as much as that stain as possible, or at least a section of it. You would see lines through it where the person was sampling. I didn't see that here. It's possible that it did it, but I don't think so.
The children were still in their beds when they were shot, which might indicate that he used a silencer.
That's a possibility, but one of many possibilities. We see a lot of times in TVs and movies people using silencers, but in real life, we rarely see them. This is Crime Scene Theory, Fargo.
Gee, somebody need a little warm-up.
You shouldn't drink coffee at a crime scene, or any sort of beverage, really.
Oh, jeez. Here's the second one.
The biggest contaminant to a crime scene is the people that go into it, the investigators themselves.
It's in the head and the hand there. I guess that's a defensive wound.
At a scene, we may act things out. The biomechanics of the way things could happen like that, or like this.
We got a shooting. These folks drive by. There's a high-speed pursuit. Ends here, and then this execution type deal.
She definitely came to conclusions way too quickly.
Yeah.
There's a lot to take in, and she didn't even go look at the other victim that was down the road, the trooper.
Let's go take a look at that trooper.
To figure out sequencing, you'd have to look at everything, a more detailed look at it before you would just come to a snap decision.
See something down there, Chief?
No, I just think I'm gonna barf.
Suspect lineup, Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
I heard him. He was singing along to the music at the bar.
Do you remember what he was singing?
I think it was that song, I Want It That Way.
Backstreet Boys, I'm familiar.
Number one, could you please sing the opening to I Want It That Way?
Okay. You are my fire.
Forensic phonetic analysis usually is involved with recorded audio evidence, not so much this, in-person audio lineup.
Tell me why.
Ain't nothing but a heartache.
Most experts will say that you can't uniquely identify someone by their voice.
I never wanna hear you say.
This is obviously for comedy purposes.
Number 5 killed my brother.
Oh my God, I forgot about that part.
Fingerprint database, person of interest.
Wow.
What the computer's looking at is different points of identification.
Wow.
So if you look at your fingerprints, anywhere that your lines of your fingerprint come apart, they come together, create islands, they start, they stop. These are all points of identification.
Your guys' prints were found at half a dozen crime scenes over the years.
And when they do have a match, it could be a match to several different possibilities.
You got down there, Carter.
And then the investigator themselves has to go through each one and include or exclude who it actually is. And then finally, any results, any sort of identification that's made has to be verified by someone else that's independent and objective in the case. Crime scene cleanup, The Simpsons.
I've never seen an angel dust for gun swap go so wrong.
Hey, a mess is a mess.
Normally, it would be more than one person that would be tasked to clean up the scene.
All right, get some paper towels, boys.
And to clean up and dispose of that biohazardous waste, you need multiple people as well.
Let me start with this filthy crime scene tape.
Eating at a crime scene, NCIS.
Are you eating the crime scene?
Okay, first off, Mom, I'm wearing gloves.
Dix, people died here.
They're just in the beginning of this crime scene investigation. He may be sitting at a desk that the suspect was at. Maybe there's important evidence that's there.
No, I'm wearing gloves.
So even if he's wearing gloves, and that's weird to be eating food with wearing gloves like that, I guess you could do it, but you still have that, whatever that grease is from those potato chips.
And they're delicious.
And you're transferring it to that area that you're working in.
Give me some.
And again, that could be an important area that they find out later on that the suspect was at.
Don't eat the whole bag.
We found something.
Too many people in a crime scene, hot buzz. There are way too many people inside this crime scene.
Hello?
You wouldn't answer your phone inside the scene. You don't want things from your phone to get into the scene, and you don't want things from the scene to get into your phone.
Nicholas, what do you want?
Well, I have something important to tell you, and I didn't want to do it over the phone.
This clip shows some good things and some bad things. They're wearing not only just a Tyvek suit and gloves, they have masks on, they have eye protection on. Then Simon Pegg goes into the scene, he's not wearing anything. They probably would not have allowed Simon Pegg to enter that scene without wearing personal protective equipment.
Janine, I've been transferred. I'm moving away for a while.
I'm not Janine.
Taking money from a crime scene, training day.
That's $250,000 you're holding right there in your hand. Buy your wife a minivan with that, put the kids through college. Give me that bag.
You know, the only checks I cash say LAPD on them, right?
What's the matter? You don't want a piece of this? Huh?
Well, no. Right?
I'm with Ethan Hawke on this one. It's not worth it. You know, it's not worth throwing your life away. No one wants to go to jail.
No.
No?
Large sums of money found at a crime scene, it has to be documented, and usually it's in the presence of some sort of supervision.
First time, you're not comfortable. I'll hold it for you.
In police departments, there are usually some sort of entity that does internal investigations, and part of that is doing integrity testing as well.
Don't touch a thing. Evidence.
Testing a theory, Ace Ventura, pet detective.
May I tell you what I think happened? Alrighty then. Roger Podacter went out after work. He had a few drinks and he came home, but he wasn't alone.
So there's way too many people here. When you establish a crime scene, you maintain what's called a crime scene log. It tracks everyone that comes into that scene, everyone that leaves that scene, and unfortunately that includes pet detectives.
This woman is Roger Podacter's neighbor. She lives across the hall. She said she heard a scream. Is that right, ma'am?
Right.
And even if it was a witness that was inside the scene at the time, we want to remove them from the scene.
And you said you had to open the balcony door when you keyed into the room?
Yeah, that's true.
He would have been brought to a police facility for an interview.
What's the point, Ventura?
In this case, the neighbor hears something, and then Ace comes up with a theory as to the position of the door during the time of the event.
There's no way that neighbor could have heard Podacter scream on the way down with that door shut.
And then relating that to someone coming afterwards and saying that the door was shut, disproving that it was a suicide.
The scream she heard came from inside this apartment before he was thrown over the balcony, and the murderer closed the door before he left.
But we would record that. And it would probably be a little more professional than singing and screaming and opening a door open and shut.
Yes! Yes!
Prince and Snow, Wind River.
Why would a teenage girl be out here?
I only know what the tracks say.
Okay, well, that's all we got.
Well, come here, I'll show you. See this one? See how the toes turned out?
Footwear is probably one of the most overlooked types of evidence at a crime scene. The interpretation that Jeremy Renner does here is he's looking at, first off, the orientation of the shoe wear impressions, and he's interpreting, first off, the direction, and that's very simple by looking at the way that the heel and toe are oriented. And then he's interpreting, which sometimes could be a little more harder to discern, is that she was running.
The front is much deeper than the back. That says she's running.
So this is kind of questionable, you know, to say that exactly she was running. If you're carrying something, that also would change the depth of your shoe wear impressions. And that also could do with the density of the snow.
She ran until she dropped here. See the pool of blood.
But you would have to look at multiple shoe wear impressions. First off, it's got to be photographed. We'd coat it with several layers of snowprint wax. This is an aerosolized wax that will spray on snow that has impressions on it. And normally that even gives us some more contrast, so we may photograph it again. And then the last step is to cast it by using some sort of impression casting material. Dead body in a freezer, Goodfellas. Yeah, I've had cases where, you know, it was mafia hits. It's funny how sometimes it's like cliche, you know, the victim was wearing a tracksuit and, you know, looks just exactly like he would on TV.
He was frozen so stiff it took them 2 days to thaw him out for the autopsy.
Frankie Carbone would take 2 days to thaw out before autopsy. Isn't unusual. It may even take up to a week depending on how they thaw out the body. We've also seen criminals that use this to hide the time of death. So one that I can think of offhand is Richard Kuklinski, who was nicknamed the Iceman Killer. He would store his dead bodies, the people that he killed, that he murdered, that he assassinated, in an industrial freezer, and then dump them at later periods of time in different areas to confuse the police as to the time of death. So having bodies frozen solid isn't rare. Actually, it happens quite a bit in the colder states here in America. Another hair analysis scene, Castle.
Long blonde hair. This could have come from one of the women at the bachelorette party.
That's what I thought until I had it tested. Came back positive for testosterone and anabolic steroids. Your blondie is a man.
Couldn't it be that it's a woman that's taking testosterone and anabolic steroids, and that would show up in her hair? At one time, they would analyze hair, and they would say gender, they would say race, they would even match a hair from a crime scene to a suspect. Today, they no longer do those things. They'll take a hair and they'll analyze it for suitability for DNA. Other things they could tell about a hair is whether it's chemically treated, whether it was burned, how it was removed, the stage of development that hair is in, the somatic origin of that hair, whether it came from your head, from your eyelash, from your pubic hair. Those are things they can tell, but not whether it's a man or a woman. So the public's perception on what forensics is and what crime scene investigators do is often built on these types of shows. This attention that the public now has, this fascination that they have with true crime and with crime scene type of shows is good because when people go and they testify to cases, they have a touchstone. They know something about this sort of evidence because they like these shows. I don't expect Hollywood to always get it right, but it's interesting to see it when they get it wrong.